let's turn our attention to what happened at Westminster Abbey yesterday. It was the memorial, of course, for the Duke of Edinburgh. And the front pages, as we've already reported, have many pictures of the Queen. But, of course, she was supported by Prince Andrew as she went into the Abbey and was escorted to her seat. The royal historian Hugo Vickers was there in the Abbey. Hugo, what was that moment like when they came in?
Well, what you must think of, first of all, is the fact that the Queen made a supreme effort to be there. We know that she has mobility problems. We know that she's been unwell. We know that she didn't go to things like the Cenotaph and the Commonwealth Service, which are absolutely things that she would wish to be present at. And she was coming from Windsor, and so she came up in the car with Prince Andrew, and they came in through the South Transept. Now, if you're going to suggest that this is a moment to sort of reintroduce Prince Andrew, had he, as was in the programme, arrived at the west door and walked right up through the whole of the Abbey, then I would agree with you. But, in fact, he came in very discreetly with the Queen. Now, the Queen needed an arm, and she had a stick. So what are you going to do? Are you going to give her a nurse? Are you going to give her an equerry or something like what? It's perfectly natural that she should be with her son. And actually, to be quite honest, I was in the Abbey. Most people in the Abbey would not have even seen Prince Andrew.
Andrew, the Daily Mail this morning, your paper, saying that other members of the royal family were a little bit appalled at this.
Yeah, I didn't. When I saw he was with her, look, we've written that he's the favourite son.
Yeah.
And as we said yesterday, this isn't just a royal family; it's her family. So she wanted to be supported by, but the trouble is, he is a man who's just paid out £12 million to settle an appalling sex abuse case against a minor. He's never admitted to anything, of course, but £12 million was handed over.
Well, he's denied.
He's denied
everything.
it. He's denied it. And the optic it presents to the whole world, the Queen being accompanied by... I hear what Hugo says. Who was it to be? But they could have found somebody else. But it was her decision. I'm reluctant to criticise the Queen on the day, which was all about her magnificent husband who'd done a great job for country, but it doesn't look great.
Omid Scobie, who is a journalist who's very close to Prince Harry and Meghan, tweeted, well, I think this is interesting. He tweeted, his presence was always going to be controversial, but Prince Andrew taking on the self-appointed role of consort for the day has completely overshadowed a beautiful service. And to think just a week ago, palace sources were fretting about the optics of a wheelchair, Kevin. That's the tweet.
Yeah, I think there's something in that. I mean, look, you saw a very elderly woman who did make a supreme effort, as Hugo said, to get there. It is her husband she's lost. The service is about that. But it was a colossal mistake. Him, of all people. Why not Charles, Anne, Edward, William? Almost anybody except a man, a disgraced, shamed, shunned son who, in a very sordid case, is paid £12 million so he doesn't end up in court. It did feel like he was on parade and she was rehabilitating him publicly. I had people watching at home, Hugo, not in the Abbey, but people watching at home, saw that. And I know from the people I've spoken to, there's kind of shock.
Hugo, there's a private, personal dynamic, isn't there, where a mother might forgive her son in pretty much anything. But there's a public visual which is endorsing him.
Well, I don't think it was endorsing him. I mean, as I said, if he'd walked up the aisle, if he'd been greeted at the West door like all the rest of the royal family...
Do you think that makes a difference, though?
No, not at all. I mean, they were both coming from Windsor together and, you know, yes, she is his son and, you know, he has also lost his father. Now, you gentlemen would accept that he's not actually a convicted criminal. But convicted criminals, if I'm not mistaken, are actually... They come out of prison, don't they, on these occasions?
And are rehabilitated? To
go to a service. So they come out for funerals. Even... Don't the Krays come out for these occasions? Yes. So, come on. I mean, he's not a convicted criminal, and all he was doing is accompanying his mother. It was incredibly discreet, to be quite honest. And even if you look at the optics, when she's in the car, she waves, he doesn't wave. He's not coming back. We know that. He's lost all his positions, and he has the right to be there at his father's funeral.
Well, I wonder whether she's saying, the Queen is saying, above all else, he's my son.
Well, I
and
think
this was his father.
I think there is an element.
She almost doesn't, it doesn't matter what everybody else thinks. And
well, I think there's certainly
the message.
I mean, I think the whole. Everything the Queen does is to do with conciliating and moving things forward. And the fact that she's seen with him in public shows, I suppose, to the world that they still get on. I mean, she stripped him of all his titles. You know, the media might like to say, well, they no longer speak or something. He's so furious about it. They're quite clearly perfectly in tune with each other. I don't think that's a bad thing to see on a day when you're celebrating the life of a husband of 73 years. Do you?
Do you know, can I just say here, my problem about this... it's the conflict between the role of mother and monarch. That's what it's all about.
It's the personal versus the public.
Instead of us all talking today about the magnificent Prince Philip, who was a magnificent, Kevin might not agree, but the magnificent support to the Queen, a great support to the country, we're talking about her shamed son. And I think that is a pity.
Well, there's always going to be that tension between the private and the public, but she has a very public role. And she was parading... look, it wasn't parking offences he paid to settle. This was a horrible, horrible case. I mean... Of
which he hasn't actually been convicted, to be quite honest.
No, but he's paid $12 million.
Yes, but you know perfectly well that they always settle those cases in America.
I know perfectly well. I know perfectly well on this case. You're quite right, I know perfectly well. That's why I think she made a big mistake.
Well, what would you have... I mean, do you have no compassion for the Queen on this occasion? When you think of
Absolutely.
She's nearly 96.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, she needs somebody with her. I can't see it personally.
This was poor... Look, this was poor judgment. There's no question. And in one way, you feel... And when I was watching it, I was thinking, because it's a memorial service for her husband, does Buckingham Palace think you just have to suck it up and you can't critique it at all and mention it?
This isn't just... people sort of watching television, because according to Andrew's paper, The Mail, senior royals reluctantly accepted that Andrew would accompany her, but they had hoped common sense would prevail and that he wouldn't play such a prominent role. That's other members of the royal family.
I'd be interested to know how they know that, but there are 13 kings and queens and a great number of foreign royalty and people who'd come a long way to come to this service, and they were all being entertained in London by the Prince of Wales and people. So the royal family were actually pretty busy looking after all of them. I mean, they'd all made the effort to come, unlike Prince Harry, for example, but, they had. And so they were busy. And, come on, it's just common sense. Prince Andrew's at Windsor and he comes up with the Queen and he goes back with the Queen.
Well, it was a car share.
He does.
I don't know what it was.
But just say here, since... Because we know she's declined physically, he's there most days and he's been looking after Mum because he lives nearby. Edward's nearby too, but he's got lots of engagements. However, as a passionate monarchist, unlike this bloke who's a Republican who's loving all of this, I just feel perhaps there was... Even if he just got her out the car and got her to the door, and the Dean could have shown her to her seat.
No, that would have looked very much more frail. I mean, holding the arm of the son is... I mean, any mother at any funeral will do that. No, come on. I think a little bit of human compassion on this one.
No, she would have wrestled with it. She made her decision.
The son she chose.
Yeah,
that very publicly.
I think very obviously it was the Queen as a mother.
Won the decision. She decided monarch, mum won.
Yeah, it's a very personal one, wasn't it? All right, thank you very much indeed for now.